The morning I drove through the iron gates of Donovan Cross's Lakeside Mansion, I told myself it was just another job. I had been repeating that lie for 3 days straight, ever since the HR manager, a sharp-faced woman named Miss Pryor, had slid the contract across her desk and said, "Mr. Reed, I need you to understand something before you sign. This household operates differently. Mr. Cross values privacy above everything. You will not discuss this family with anyone outside these walls. You will not form inappropriate attachments. You will teach, and you will maintain professional distance. Is that understood?" I had nodded like the responsible adult I was supposed to be. Signed my name, told myself it was just another job. Standing in front of those gates, I was already losing the argument with myself. The mansion sat at the edge of a private lake, surrounded by old oak trees that filtered morning light into something golden and cinematic. Everything about the property felt intentional. Calculated beauty, architectural perfection. Later I would learn that Donovan Cross had designed it himself. That every angle, every window, every shadow falling across the stone floors was exactly where he'd placed it. That's what he did. He built things that looked effortless but were actually the result of obsessive, meticulous control. I should have understood that first. Would have saved me a lot of confusion later. Inside, the mansion was cooler than expected. Marble floors, high ceilings, walls lined with art that looked museum quality, because it probably was. A housekeeper named Mrs. Aldine showed me through silently. Her expression the carefully neutral look of someone who had seen many tutors come and go. I counted that as a warning and filed it away. Then I heard heels. Naomi Walsh entered the entrance hall with the kind of presence that made you aware of every square inch of space she occupied. She was stunning in the way that very intentional people are stunning. Dark auburn hair swept back perfectly, silk blouse, structured trousers, and eyes that were doing a complete assessment of me before she'd taken 3 steps. "You're Callum Reed." Not a question. "Yes, it's nice to meet you, Ms. Walsh." Her smile arrived and departed so quickly, I almost missed it. "Donovan's in a meeting, he'll be out shortly. Ezra is in the study." She paused, looking me over one final time. "Try not to overwhelm him. He doesn't warm to new people quickly." Then she turned and walked away, leaving a trail of expensive perfume, and the distinct feeling that I had already been assessed, categorized, and filed under potential problem. I found Ezra exactly where she said he'd be, sitting at a large study table covered in drawing paper, colored pencils organized by shade in a way that no 7-year-old did by accident. He was small for his age, dark-haired, with a careful stillness that made him seem older. He didn't look up when I came in. "Hi Ezra, I'm Callum, I'm going to be your tutor." Silence. His pencil kept moving across the paper. I pulled out a chair and sat down beside him instead of across from him. Didn't say anything, just waited. After about 2 minutes, he slid his drawing toward me without looking up. A landscape, a lake, trees, light hitting water. It was extraordinary for a child his age. "Did you paint this?" I asked. "Drew it." He finally looked at me, dark eyes, careful and searching. "Can you teach me to paint too? Not just school things?" "Absolutely." Something shifted in his expression, just slightly. The smallest crack in a carefully maintained wall. We were midway through a reading exercise when the door opened. I heard the change in the room before I saw him. Ezra's posture shifted, opened up, some unconscious recognition of a specific presence. Donovan Cross was exactly what his reputation suggested and somehow completely different from what I expected. Tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a dark suit jacket he was already shrugging off as he walked in. Sharp features, dark hair with the faintest silver at the temples, and eyes that were, I noticed immediately, the same shade as Ezra's. When he looked at his son, something happened to his face that I don't think he was aware of. Everything controlled about him softened, not dramatically, just enough to reveal what lived underneath all that architecture. "Hey Ez," his voice dropped half an octave. "Baba." Ezra held up his drawing. "Look what I finished." Donovan crossed the room and crouched beside his son's chair, examining the drawing with complete, unhurried attention. Ezra nodded, pleased. "The light's perfect. You got the reflection exactly right." He looked up then, and his eyes landed on me. He stood, extended his hand. "Callum Reed." "Yes, sir." "Donovan is fine." His grip was firm, his gaze direct. "Miss Pryor told me about your background. Philosophy degree, 3 years tutoring experience, specialty in working with children who have been diagnosed as highly sensitive." "That's right. Ezra is." He paused, choosing words carefully. "He's perceptive." He notices things most adults miss and feels them more intensely. Previous tutors have found that challenging. I don't find it challenging, I find it interesting. Donovan looked at me for a moment longer than necessary. Then something moved through his expression, something quick and unidentifiable, and he nodded. Good. He turned back to Ezra, ruffled his hair with a gentleness that was almost startling to witness in someone who otherwise radiated such controlled precision. Be good for Callum, okay? Ezra leaned into the touch. He's nice, Baba, I already checked. Donovan laughed. Soft, real, completely unguarded. And the sound of it did something strange to the air in the room, made it warmer, made it feel like something that didn't belong in a mansion this cold. I glanced toward the doorway instinctively. Naomi was standing just outside, having returned without announcement. She was watching Donovan laugh. Her expression was composed, but her eyes told a different story. She had noticed the same thing I had, that his laugh existed in a different register than everything else about him, that it arrived without warning, without calculation. Her gaze shifted to me, found me watching. I looked away first. That evening, driving home along the lake road, I tried to rebuild the argument with myself. Just a job, professional distance, maintenance of appropriate boundaries. I had a list of reasons why all of it was going to be fine, but I kept coming back to one moment. Donovan crouching beside his son, examining a child's drawing like it was the most important thing in his day. His voice dropping that half octave, the laugh that arrived without permission, and Naomi's eyes finding mine across the doorway. I should have been worried about that. I was, but not as much as I should have been. The first 2 weeks established themselves into a rhythm that I told myself was purely professional. I arrived at 8 every morning. Mrs. Aldean let me in, offered coffee I always accepted, and I would find Ezra already in the study, pencils organized, waiting with the particular focused energy of a child who had learned to be self-contained. We worked through his curriculum, reading comprehension, mathematics, science, but the sessions that Ezra came alive in were always the creative ones. Art, storytelling, imagination exercises that I wove around the formal lessons because that was where his mind opened fully. He was extraordinary. The more I got to know him, the more I understood what Donovan had meant. Ezra felt everything at depth. A sad story could bring tears he'd try to hide. A beautiful piece of music playing from the library speakers would make him stop whatever he was doing and just listen. He noticed details in the environment that most people walked past entirely. He was 7 years old and already paying the particular emotional tax that highly perceptive people pay throughout their lives. I understood it, because I paid the same tax. Naomi moved through the house like weather, sometimes absent for days at a stretch when her design work took her to the city, and when she was present, filling every room with an energy that was composed and watchful. She wasn't unkind to Ezra. She was simply distant in the way that some adults are with children. Polite, correct, fundamentally uninterested in the internal world of a 7-year-old. Ezra registered this with the accuracy of a seismograph. He never said anything. He didn't need to. He just drew quieter pictures on the days she was home. Donovan's schedule was inconsistent. Some days he was gone before I arrived and returned after I'd left. Other days he appeared mid-morning, still on a phone call, moving through the house with the focused velocity of someone managing more things simultaneously than should be humanly possible. But then there were the other days. It started on a Thursday, 12 days into my time at the mansion. Ezra and I were in the kitchen. I'd moved the session there because we were doing a lesson on measurement that involved baking, and Mrs. Aldean had graciously surrendered her space for an hour. Ezra was elbow-deep in flour, measuring cups arranged in precise order, his face showing the intense concentration he brought to everything he cared about. We were both laughing about a measuring cup disaster when I heard the front door. Donovan appeared in the kitchen doorway and stopped. I don't know exactly what he saw. Ezra with flour on his nose and a mixing bowl that was slightly too large for him, laughing with his head thrown back at something I'd said, me leaning against the counter with my sleeves rolled up, genuinely entertained by his son's company, a mess of ingredients across the marble island, and an afternoon light making everything look warmer than it probably was. Whatever he saw, it stopped him completely. Ezra noticed him and his face did that opening thing. Baba, we're making measurement cake. Measurement cake. Donovan set his jacket over a chair and walked in. He looked at the organized chaos, then at me. Is this standard tutoring practice? Applied mathematics, I said, more retained when experienced. Something played at the corner of his mouth, not quite a smile. The suggestion of one. Right. He looked at Ezra. What do you need me to do? Ezra's expression shifted into pure surprise. "You're staying? Unless I'm in the way." "You're not in the way." Ezra pushed a measuring cup toward him. "You do the butter. Callum says you have to be exact." Donovan rolled up his sleeves, crisp dress shirt, silver cufflinks set aside on the counter, and followed Ezra's instructions with the same precision he probably applied to architectural schematics. The three of us worked around each other in the kitchen, Ezra directing with the authority of someone who had just discovered he was the most competent person in the room. And somewhere in the middle of it, Donovan laughed again. That same sound, unguarded, warm, real. I was measuring vanilla extract, and I lost count. When the cake was in the oven, Ezra went to wash flour off himself, and Donovan and I were left in the kitchen with the comfortable disorder of the afternoon's work. "He's never done that with me," Donovan said quietly. Not sad exactly, but honest in a way that cost him something. "The cooking thing, the laughing like that, he's always careful around me. He loves you. That's why he's careful. He doesn't want to disappoint you." Donovan looked at me sharply. "I've never given him reason to think." "You don't have to give a reason. Sensitive children read the emotional atmosphere. He knows you carry a lot. He doesn't want to add to it." I paused. "He draws you as someone standing very high up, alone. I've seen it several times." The silence that followed was the kind that meant something had landed somewhere true. "How do I fix that?" he asked. "You already started. You stayed." He looked at the oven where the cake was baking, and I watched something work through his expression, something complicated and private. Then he looked at me, and I noticed again what I'd noticed the first day. The directness of his gaze. The way he looked at you like he was reading load-bearing walls. "You're very perceptive yourself," he said. "Comes with the territory." "No." He shook his head slightly. "It doesn't. I've met plenty of people in this field. It's specific to you." I didn't know what to say to that. Before I had to figure it out, Ezra returned, clean and bright-eyed, and the conversation dissolved back into the easy three-way rhythm of the afternoon. But that evening when Naomi came home and found the kitchen cleaned but still faintly smelling of vanilla and sugar, she stopped in the doorway the same way Donovan had. She looked at the barely there evidence of the afternoon. A dish towel folded slightly wrong. Ezra's measuring cup still drying on the rack. "What happened in here?" she asked Mrs. Aldine. "Mr. Cross joined the lesson today, ma'am." The boy was very happy. Naomi was quiet for a moment. Then she walked to the refrigerator, took out a glass of water, and said nothing more. But she stood there longer than necessary, and when I passed through on my way to collect my things, her eyes found mine with a precision that had nothing casual about it. "Good session today, Callum?" "Very good. Ezra worked really hard." "And Donovan? Did he work hard too?" The question was light. The tone underneath it was not. "He was a natural," I said carefully. She smiled, that quick, departing smile. "He usually is." I said goodnight and let myself out. In the car, I sat for a full minute before starting the engine. The afternoon had been simple, good even. Ezra had learned something, laughed a lot, and his father had stayed. That was all that happened. I told myself that was all that happened. But I could still hear Donovan's laugh in that unguarded register, and I could still feel the way his question had landed. "It's specific to you," and I was aware with the particular clarity of someone who notices too much, that Naomi Walsh had heard something in the afternoon she hadn't been present for. She was watching, carefully, patiently, and I was beginning to understand that the HR manager's warning hadn't been about professional protocol at all. It had been about something much more specific, something already in motion long before I arrived. I started the engine and drove home along the lake road, the water dark and still in the evening light. Just a job, I told myself. The lake didn't believe me either. It was raining the night everything became honest. Not immediately honest. It arrived in layers, the way most true things do. First the rain, which started mid-afternoon and intensified into something steady and serious by evening. Then Naomi's absence, which Mrs. Aldine mentioned quietly. "Miss Walsh is staying in the city tonight." Weather. Then Ezra's reading session running long because he'd become absorbed in a story about a lighthouse keeper, asking questions that spiraled out into philosophy, which was exactly the kind of conversation that made tutoring feel less like work and more like the reason I'd chosen this over other things I could have done with a philosophy degree. By 7, Ezra was asleep. I gathered my things and was pulling on my jacket in the entrance hall when Donovan appeared from his study. He looked different in the evening. Still dressed from his workday, but the jacket was gone and his sleeves were rolled back, and there was a tiredness around his eyes that the daytime version of him kept more carefully managed. You don't have to leave right away, he said. The rain is bad on the lake road. I'd feel better if you waited it out. It was a reasonable, responsible thing to say. I made the mistake of agreeing with it. I made tea, he added. The library's warm. The library was everything the rest of the house was, but more so floor-to-ceiling shelves. Reading chairs worn soft with use. Amber light from a standing lamp in the corner. Rain hitting the tall windows. The particular quiet of a house where a child is sleeping. I settled into one of the chairs and accepted the tea. And Donovan sat across from me and looked out at the rain like a man who had been carrying something heavy all day and was only now allowing himself to set it down temporarily. We didn't talk immediately. That was the thing I would remember most clearly, the comfort of the silence. It wasn't the silence of two strangers with nothing to say. It was the silence of two people who had somehow skipped past the stage where silence needs to be filled. Ezra told me about the lighthouse keeper, Donovan said eventually. He asked me whether lighthouses were lonely or happy. What did you tell him? I told him I thought they were both, and that some things can be both at once. I paused. He thought about it for a long time, then said he thought his dad was like that. Donovan went very still. He means it as something true, not something sad, I said carefully. He's trying to understand you. He thinks about you constantly. I know he does. His voice was quiet. That's part of what makes it hard. He's watching me for information about how to be in the world, and I'm not sure what I'm teaching him. You're teaching him that the people you love are worth staying for, that showing up matters even when you're tired. He sees all of that, and the rest? He looked at me directly. Does he see the rest? What's the rest? He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, hands around his teacup. That I've spent the last 4 years building things, companies, buildings, a life that looks exactly right from every external angle, and I've somehow ended up in a place I don't fully recognize. He stopped. I don't say that to people. I know. I'm not entirely sure why I said it to you. Maybe because I'm not entirely part of the world you built. I'm just here for Ezra. I kept my voice level. There's less at stake in honesty with someone like me. Something moved through his expression. That's not why. The rain intensified against the windows. Neither of us looked away from the other, and the moment stretched into the kind of territory that ordinary moments don't reach. There was something in his eyes, not attraction yet, or not only that, something rawer and more frightening. Recognition. The look of someone who has been opaque for a very long time and has unexpectedly found a window. I designed this house around the idea of controlled space, he said, looking around the library. Every room serves a specific function. Every sightline is intentional. I can tell you exactly why the light hits the water at 4 p.m. the way it does from Ezra's bedroom window. I planned it. He looked back at me. I plan everything. I know. I didn't plan this. The sentence sat between us, simple and completely weighted. I should have redirected. Should have said something to steer us back toward professional ground. I had been in situations before where a boundary needed to be named, and I'd always been good at naming it clearly and early. Instead, I said, neither did I. His hands tightened slightly around the cup. Callum, Donovan, just our names. Acknowledgement without action. The rain doing the only thing it was capable of. Coming down, coming down, coming down. I'm engaged, he said. Not as a rebuke, as something he was reminding himself of. I know that. Naomi and I have been together for 4 years. She's not a bad person. She's intelligent and driven, and we made sense as a couple in every measurable way. But he was quiet for a long moment. She has never once asked me why the light hits the water at 4 p.m. She walked past that window for 2 years before I pointed it out. He looked at his hands. You noticed it on your 3rd day. You mentioned it to Ezra during a lesson about angles and light. He told me. I remembered the moment. The low winter light coming through at a specific slant, turning the lake surface briefly into hammered gold. Some people notice those things, I said. You do. He looked up at me. Why do you do this? Tutoring, your background philosophy, the academic record Ms. Pryor showed me. You could have gone other directions. I like being in the room where a person figures something out. The exact moment it clicks. There's nothing else that feels like that. Nothing? The question was quiet and careful, and asking something slightly different from what it appeared to be asking. Not many things. I corrected. He stood up, then not abruptly, but deliberately, the way a man stands when he's made a decision to create distance before the conversation goes somewhere irreversible. He walked to the window and stood with his back to me, watching the rain. You should probably stay until this eases up, he said. His voice had returned to its managed register. The controlled version. Yes, there's a guest room on the second floor. Mrs. Aldean keeps it ready. Donovan. He turned.
You don't have to manage the distance right now. I'm not asking you for anything.
Something crossed his face. Relief. And something that hurt more than relief. I know you're not. That's not the problem. He left me with the rain and the library and the tea going cold in my hands. I sat there for a long time, listening to the water against the glass, running back through the conversation with the particular precision of someone who notices too much. He had told me things he didn't tell people. I had responded with things I didn't usually say. And at the end of it, he had stood up and made distance not because he wanted to, but because he felt he had to. The light in the library was amber and warm and the bookshelves rose to the ceiling. And somewhere upstairs Ezra was sleeping and dreaming, probably about lighthouses. I thought about what I'd told him, that some things can be both at once. Lonely and not lonely. Right and not right. Professional and something else entirely. I stayed until the rain eased, which took another 2 hours. Donovan didn't come back to the library. When I let myself out, I noticed the light under his study door. He was still awake, working, managing. I drove home on the wet lake road and understood that something had shifted tonight that wasn't going to shift back. Not because anything had happened, but because we'd both admitted, in the careful language of people who choose their words precisely, that something was happening, and neither of us had left the room. Naomi came home from the city the next morning, and I felt the change in the house before I saw her. It was in the way Mrs. Aldean moved, slightly more precise, slightly more contained. It was in the way Ezra came to the study door twice to look down the hallway before settling. Small calibrations that a house makes when its atmosphere shifts. I was setting up the morning's materials when I heard her car on the drive, and I made a decision, quietly and deliberately, to be exactly what I had always presented myself as. Ezra's tutor, professional, appropriate, present for a specific and bounded purpose. Whatever had happened in the library the night before existed in a separate space, and I intended to keep it there. Naomi appeared in the study doorway at 9:15. She was impeccably dressed despite the morning, which I had come to understand was not about vanity, but about control. Her clothes were armor, functional and deliberate. "Good morning, Callum." She looked around the room, materials on the table, Ezra engaged with a writing exercise, everything orderly. Productive session? Very. Ezra's been working on descriptive writing. He's remarkably good. She looked at Ezra with that composed, surface-level attention. "That's lovely, Ezra." Ezra looked up briefly. "Hi, Naomi," then back to his paper. She absorbed the minimal response without visible reaction, which told me she was used to it. She turned to go, then stopped, turned back. "Callum, do you have a moment? When Ezra has a break?" "Of course." An hour later, Ezra was in the garden with Mrs. Aldean. They had a standing arrangement about the roses, which Ezra was inexplicably devoted to, and I went to find Naomi in the sitting room. She was standing at the window that faced the lake, coffee in hand, and she didn't turn when I came in. "Close the door, please." I did. "I'm going to be direct with you, because I think you're intelligent enough to appreciate directness." She turned then. Her eyes were steady and sharp. "Donovan told me you stayed last night. Because of the rain." "That's right. And you two talked. We had tea. We spoke about Ezra, mostly." "Mostly." She let the words sit for a moment. "I've known Donovan for 4 years, Callum. I know what his voice sounds like when he talks about Ezra, and I know what it sounds like when he talks about something else." She set her coffee down. "I heard him on the phone this morning. He was telling his business partner he'd had a good evening. He sounded rested. He hasn't sounded rested in months." I said nothing. There was nothing to say that wouldn't be either a lie or a confirmation of something she was still building a case around. "I'm not accusing you of anything," she continued. "I want to be clear about that. You've done excellent work with Ezra. He's brighter, more open, more connected. That's real and I'm not dismissing it." She met my eyes. "But Donovan is in a vulnerable place. He carries more than he shows and he doesn't lean on people easily. When he does lean, he leans hard." She paused. "I need you to be careful." "I am careful." "Be more careful. No hostility, just precision. You seem like a good person. I'd prefer this situation doesn't become something that damages anyone, including you." I nodded. "I understand." "Good." She picked up her coffee and turned back to the window. "That's all." I left the sitting room and stood in the hallway for a moment, letting the conversation settle. She was not wrong. She was also not entirely right. She was building a picture from available evidence, and some of the evidence was accurate, but she was missing the central fact, which was that nothing had happened. Nothing concrete. Nothing that could be named. What I didn't let myself examine too closely was the part where nothing concrete felt like more than most things I had experienced that were solid and nameable. Donovan came home at noon, which was unusual. He appeared in the study while I was working with Ezra on multiplication tables, and he caught my eye over his son's head and held it for exactly long enough to communicate that the morning had been difficult, without specifying how. "Good morning," I said, almost afternoon. He sat down at the edge of the table. "How's the multiplication?" "Sevens are the enemy," Ezra said seriously. They've always been. 7 times 8 nearly ended my academic career in primary school. Ezra looked at him with delight. "You were bad at math?" "Catastrophically. Your grandfather still brings it up at Christmas." Ezra laughed, and the room softened, and for a short stretch of time it was like the previous night and the morning that followed. It hadn't happened. We just existed together, the three of us, in the easy rhythm we'd somehow developed. Then Naomi appeared in the doorway. She took in the scene, Donovan at the table, laughing at something Ezra had said, me across from them both, and something moved across her face that she controlled immediately. She smiled, addressed Donovan. "Lunch is ready when you are. Right? Give me a few minutes." She nodded and left. Donovan watched her go, and his expression shifted into something I recognized now. That particular tiredness that lived underneath the architecture of his daily management. Ezra, with the sensitivity that missed nothing, looked between the doorway and his father. Then he put his hand over his father's hand on the table. Donovan looked down at his son's small hand. Something in his throat moved. "I'll be right back," he said quietly. He got up and went after Naomi. Ezra and I continued the lesson. We could hear the low murmur of voices from the dining room. Nothing discernible, but the register was unmistakable. Not quite an argument. The prolonged, exhausted undertone of two people navigating a conversation they had almost certainly been having in various forms for longer than either wanted to admit. Ezra kept his eyes on his workbook. His pencil moved steadily, but his ears were doing what mine were doing. "Callum," he said without looking up. "Yes? Is it bad if two people are not happy together?" I was careful. "Why do you ask?" "I just wonder." He erased something, rewrote it. "I want Baba to be happy. He's happier when he's with you and me." He said it as a simple observation, the way children state things they haven't yet learned to be cautious about stating. The voices in the dining room had gone quiet. "Your dad loves you very much," I said. "That's the most important thing." Ezra nodded, apparently satisfied with that for the moment. He turned the page of his workbook and moved on to the next set of problems, and I watched him and thought about what Naomi had said about being careful, and what Donovan had said about not planning things, and what Ezra had just said with the clear, uncomplicated accuracy of someone who hadn't yet learned to look away from what was true. Donovan returned 20 minutes later. He sat back down at the table without explanation, and I didn't ask for one. He helped Ezra with the remaining multiplication tables until the session ended. When I was leaving, Donovan walked me to the door. Naomi was elsewhere in the house. He stopped in the entrance hall with his hands in his pockets and looked at me with an expression that had stopped trying to be managed. "She noticed," he said. "I know." She spoke to me. A muscle in his jaw moved. "I'm sorry, that wasn't appropriate." She was measured about it. She wasn't wrong to say what she said. "What did she say?" "That I should be careful." He held my gaze. "And are you being careful?" I thought about the library, the rain, the sentence that had sat between us. I didn't plan this in my answer to it. "I'm trying," I said honestly. He nodded slowly, his hand lifted slightly, the way I had noticed before, that unconscious movement toward something he then redirected. "Good night, Callum." "Good night, Donovan." I walked to my car feeling the weight of the afternoon in my chest. Not heavy exactly, more the way something feels when it has become real enough to have actual mass. I drove home along the lake road, and this time I didn't tell myself anything. I just let the water be dark and the road be wet and the evening be exactly what it was. 3 days after Naomi's warning, she was gone again. Not to the city this time. Donovan told me in the morning, simply and without drama, that Naomi had gone to stay with her sister in Portland for a while. He said while. Not for a few days. Not for the weekend. While. Which was the word people used when they didn't know the shape of the time yet. I asked Ezra if he was okay. He said yes, with the particular equanimity of a child who had registered this as a change but not a catastrophe. Then he showed me a new drawing he'd done overnight. The lake at night, moonlight on the water, two figures on the dock. I recognized both of them without needing to ask. That evening, after Ezra's lesson, Donovan asked me to stay for dinner. I knew I should decline. I had been cataloging the moments over the past several weeks where I should have done the reasonable, boundaried thing and had instead done something else. And this was clearly another one on the list. Dinner was not part of the arrangement. Dinner was not professional distance. Dinner was an ordinary human thing that would feel completely natural because too many things with Donovan felt completely natural, and that was precisely the problem. Okay, I said. Ezra was ecstatic. He insisted on setting the table himself, which meant the forks were on the wrong side and the glasses were at inconsistent distances from the plates, and it was the most correctly laid table I had ever seen. Donovan cooked, which I hadn't known he could do. He moved through the kitchen with the same precise efficiency he brought to everything. Mise en place, no wasted motion, every step deliberate. Pasta, which he made from scratch, which felt like an unreasonable amount of effort and also somehow completely in character. Ezra sat on the counter narrating a story about something that had happened with the Roses and Mrs. Aldine, elaborating with increasing dramatic detail, and Donovan listened with complete attention while his hands worked the dough, and I stood near the window with a glass of water watching the two of them and felt something settle in my chest that I immediately recognized as dangerous. This felt like a life, not the life I had, not the life that existed in this house's official version. Something else, warm and specific and real. We ate at the kitchen table instead of the formal dining room. Ezra's suggestion, which Donovan accepted immediately. The conversation wandered through Ezra's astronomy interest, which had developed recently from a book I'd introduced, a building project of Donovan's that Ezra wanted explained, a disagreement about whether penguins or otters were objectively superior, which I eventually settled by declaring both undefeated in their respective categories. After dinner, while Ezra cleared his plate with the seriousness of someone performing an important task, Donovan poured 2 glasses of wine and we moved to the kitchen island and sat across from each other, and the easy dinner atmosphere shifted into something slightly more still. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "You always ask permission first," I noticed. Old habit. My father was certain conversations needed to be announced before they happened. He turned the wine glass in his hands. "Do you have someone, outside of here, someone you're—" "No," I said. "Why not?" I considered the question. I notice a lot. Most people find that uncomfortable eventually. There's a threshold where being truly seen tips from flattering into unsettling, and I tend to cross it. He was quiet for a moment. "I find it the opposite of unsettling." "I know. Is that a problem?" "It might be," I said honestly. He nodded, set his glass down, looked at his hands the way he did when he was organizing thoughts before deploying them. "I want to tell you something, and I need you to let me finish before you say anything." "Okay. Naomi and I haven't been right for a long time. I don't mean recently, with all of this. I mean before you came here, before anything, for longer than I've been willing to say out loud. We were good together in theory, on paper as a structure, but a structure that has no feeling at its center is just geometry." He paused. "I proposed to her because it was the next logical step, and I believed in logical steps. I'm not sure I believe in them the same way anymore." "What changed?" He looked at me. "You know what changed?" I held his gaze. "Say it clearly. I need you to say it clearly." Something moved through his expression, a kind of bracing, the way a person looks when they're about to step off something high. "You changed things. Not by doing anything wrong, not by crossing any line, just by being exactly who you are in this house every day. You talk to my son like his thoughts matter. You notice the light on the water. You sit in silence without filling it with noise. You said to me that you hadn't planned this either, and that was the most honest thing anyone has said to me in years." He exhaled. "That's what changed." The kitchen was quiet. Somewhere upstairs, Ezra was in bed with his astronomy book, and the lake was doing whatever the lake did at night, and Donovan Cross had just said the thing neither of us had been saying out loud. "This is very complicated," I said finally. "Yes. You have an engagement to end. You have Ezra to consider. There's a professional dynamic here that doesn't disappear regardless of what we say in this kitchen. I know all of that, and Naomi deserves honesty. Whatever is happening with your engagement, she deserves a clear conversation about it that has nothing to do with me. Whatever decision you make there needs to be about what's true between you and her, not about me." He nodded. "You're right. You're completely right." He looked at me with that direct, load-bearing gaze. "Does any of that change what you feel?" I was quiet for a moment. No, I said. He reached across the island and put his hand over mine. Not tentative this time. Deliberate. His hand was warm and steady, and the touch was so simple and so significant that I couldn't move for a second. I'm not asking you to wait. I'm not asking you for anything, he said. I just needed you to know that what I feel is real, that it's not confusion or circumstance. He pressed my hand once gently. It's you. I turned my hand over under his, and let our fingers settle together, and we sat like that for a while, neither of us speaking, the wine glasses between us and the house quiet around us. When I finally drove home that night, the lake was silver in the dark, and I held the feeling of his hand in mine the entire way. 2 weeks later, Naomi came back. Not to stay, she made that clear within the first hour. She came back to have a conversation, which was the most honest framing she had given anything in the time I had known her. I arrived for Ezra's morning lesson and found both of them in the sitting room, the door half open, the energy of the house carrying the particular weight of something that had been building and was now being concluded. I settled Ezra in the study and put on a nature documentary he'd been wanting to watch as supplementary material. And then I sat at the table and tried to be very quiet and very professional and not exist in any way that affected what was happening 40 feet down the corridor. I mostly failed at this because I could hear enough. Naomi's voice was controlled and tired in a way that was different from her usual controlled composure. The fight had gone out of it, not because she had lost, but because she had decided to stop spending energy on a conclusion she had already reached. I've spent 4 years with you, Donovan. I know what you look like when you're fully present, and I know what you look like when you're somewhere else. For the last 3 months you've been somewhere else. A pause. Donovan said, "This isn't about Callum." No, you're right. It's about us. It's about the fact that somewhere in the last 4 years we became a very functional arrangement and stopped being people who chose each other. Her voice had something in it, not tears but adjacent to them. I've chosen you 100 times. I'm not sure you've been choosing me for a while. Silence. Naomi, don't quiet, firm. Don't apologize, I don't want that. I just want you to be honest with me finally the way I'm being honest with you. A longer silence. Then Donovan said, "You're right, I haven't been." A breath. "And you deserve someone who chooses you the way you've chosen me. Completely and clearly, you deserve that." Whatever Naomi said next was too quiet for me to hear. Ezra had gone still beside me. The documentary was explaining migration patterns, but he wasn't watching it. He was looking at his hands on the table. "Ezra," I said softly, "is it going to be okay?" he asked. Not upset, just careful. The question of a child who had learned to ask carefully. "Yes," I said. "Some things have to change to become okay. But it's going to be okay." He thought about this for a moment, nodded. Then, with the ability children have to fully inhabit the present once they've decided to, he picked up his pencil and went back to his work. Naomi left an hour later. I heard her car on the drive and the particular quality of the house's silence that followed. A new silence, not heavy like the silences before difficult conversations, settled, like something had been set down that had been held for too long. Donovan appeared in the study doorway. He looked tired in a way that was clean, rather than accumulated. The tiredness of someone who has just finished something hard, not the tiredness of someone still carrying it. "Hey, Ez." His voice was soft. Ezra looked up, assessed his father with those dark, accurate eyes. Then he got up from his chair, walked to Donovan and hugged him around the middle. Donovan's arms came around his son, and his eyes closed briefly. When he opened them, they found mine over Ezra's head. I held his gaze and didn't say anything. There was nothing that needed saying in that moment. "Can we go to the dock?" Ezra asked, his voice muffled against his father's shirt. "The 3 of us. You said we'd go when it was warm enough." Donovan looked out the window. Late morning, clear sky, the lake catching the light the way it always did at this hour. The light that Donovan had designed into this house 10 years ago, before Ezra, before Naomi, before any of what had accumulated in the years since. "Yeah, buddy," he said. "Let's go to the dock." We walked down through the gardens and across the grass to the wooden dock that extended over the lake's edge. Ezra ran ahead with the barely restrained velocity of a child released into open space. He crouched at the dock's end and stared into the water, immediately absorbed in whatever was happening just beneath the surface. Donovan and I walked more slowly, our shoulders almost touching. "I'm sorry you were in the middle of that," he said quietly. "I wasn't. That was between you and her. Still, it's a complicated position to have put you in. I chose to be here," I said. That's on me, not you. He stopped walking. We were midway down the dock, Ezra's small figure at the far end, the water spreading out in every direction, the oaks framing the shoreline the way he had intended when he drew the plans for this place. I ended the engagement, he said. Not because of you. That's important to me that you know that. I know, it was already over. You made it impossible to keep pretending it wasn't. He looked at me. I don't want to pressure you into anything. I know the situation is still complicated. I'm still your employer, technically. Ezra is still central to whatever this is. Those are real considerations. They are, I agreed. But I also meant what I said in the kitchen. Everything I said, so did I. He turned to face me fully. What do we do? I thought about the question. About Naomi's voice saying you deserve someone who chooses you completely and clearly. About Ezra at the end of the dock, crouching over the water, his dark hair ruffled by the breeze. About rain against library windows, and a hand turning over to let fingers settle together. First, I said, Ezra's tutoring arrangement becomes something contracted through an agency, so there's no direct employment dynamic between us. I'll make some calls this week. The corner of his mouth moved. Practical. Second, we go slowly. Whatever this is, we let it be what it actually is, rather than what the pressure of the situation makes it. We don't perform anything. We don't rush anything. Agreed. Third. I paused. Third, he prompted. I think Ezra is trying to catch something with his hands and he's about to lean too far over the edge of the dock. Donovan turned. Ezra had indeed reached a precarious angle over the water. Ezra, I almost had it. Ezra protested, pulling back. There's a fish, Baba. A big one. A big one. Donovan walked toward him, shaking his head with a helpless smile, and sat down at the dock's edge beside his son. He looked back at me. Are you going to come look at this fish or not? I walked to the end of the dock and sat on Ezra's other side. The three of us looked down into the water, which was clear enough to see the pale shapes of fish moving in slow arcs below the surface. There, Ezra whispered. See it? The big one. I see it, I said. It comes here every morning. I've been watching it for weeks. I think it lives here. Everything needs a place to live, Donovan said. He was looking at the water, but his shoulder was warm against mine, and it was fully intentional, and we both knew it. A place that's actually theirs. Ezra leaned his head against his father's arm. Donovan put his arm around him. We sat there on the end of the dock, the three of us, while the fish moved in the deep water below and the oaks made their slow sound in the breeze, and the light did exactly what Donovan had designed it to do at this hour. Fell across the lake in long, hammered plains of gold. This is my favorite place, Ezra announced. Mine too, Donovan said. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. My shoulder was against his, and Ezra was warm and solid between us, and the lake was doing what it had always done. Patient and silver and indifferent to all the things humans built around its edges. I had come here to teach a child. I had ended up through a sequence of ordinary moments that had accumulated into something extraordinary, in the only place I wanted to be. Some things can be both at once. I had told Ezra that about lighthouses. It was true about more than lighthouses. I thought now, complicated and simple. Unexpected and right. Arrived at through rain, and libraries and kitchens and patience and the particular grace of letting something be real rather than managed. The lake moved, the light shifted. Somewhere in the deep water, the fish turned in a slow arc and disappeared. We stayed on the dock until the morning became afternoon, and no one suggested leaving, and nothing needed to be said that hadn't already been said, and the house waited for us at the end of the garden the way houses wait for the people who finally belong inside them.